Hey there, listeners. Well, I had a great interview with a guy called Zach Colman. Now, he's a speaker and a leader, and he's the founder of a couple organizations, Creative and GymMark are the two organizations. The title of the episode is called What is Your Leadership Brand? Something that I talk to a lot of leaders about, but actually specializes in helping people around their branding and so forth. Now, a few things that we talked about in the episode. One was we talked about setting up your own path, and he had a take on that kind of concept. Fear-driven growth is one other thing we talked but about your brand as a leader and how you're developing it. The other thing too was how to build a culture with an online team. It was a fascinating conversation throughout the whole episode, and so let's sit back and enjoy the interview.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us today. I've got an awesome guest. His name is Zach Colman. Zach, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today's episode. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I know you've got a podcast too, so it's great to talk to another podcaster. But Zach, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am in Arizona. I usually just tell people Phoenix area because it's one of those cities where everyone just assumes that, hey, Phoenix is a desert. And so I just say Phoenix. So I'm from Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's great to be able to use technology to be able to talk to you today from across the other side of the pond, as we call it, and so the Pacific. So it's very good. Now, the question I've got for you is, well, I'm actually giving a little introduction to the episode and about you to the audience or to listeners. Tell us more about you and your background.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Zach Colman. I grew up playing soccer my whole life. My dad was an NFL kicker and way before, so don't ask me if you could find him. It was like in the 70s he played. But I grew up trying to be just like my father and wanted to become a professional kicker just like him. And I got to a stage in my life where I realized I had to set my own path, right? And as I went through the normal college type growing experience that I think a lot of us go to as we try to find ourselves, which I like to call my first rebrand period in my life, I fell into visual communications. I started off at Northern Arizona University. Then I said, hey, I'm going to do video game design, and realized I didn't want to be my age now and be making video games. And then I ended up going to ASU and just loving their program. And I ended up getting my bachelor's of science in the visual communications field. And that kind of set me on my first path. From there, I still had a vision for working in the sports arena. And so I ended up job hopping. So you could say I was always one of those people that I would learn everything from a company. And then like 3-4 months in, I'd get bored. At the time, I thought it was just money because it was during the first recession period of 2010, but which of course is part of it. But I think at the end of the day, I just got bored and I job hopped. I started working for the Phoenix Suns at one time, worked there for about a year and a half, and then I did freelance for them. And then I moved to Pearson Education, which were my last two bigger jobs, working as a creative director there and working on the education side for college students. And I just got to a point where I had what I call the honeypot syndrome, where I had a really good leader in place. And then I had, within a 2-year period, I had a good, I had an okay, somewhat fine. And then I had one that they just weren't the best. And I was already one of those people that loved communicating and loved talking. I'd always go on interviews, even if I wasn't looking for a new job. And I ended up getting this part-time freelance gig where I could fly out to New York. American Express was going to pay me to come out and do all their wireframes. I turned down the job because I was the fear of going out on my own. And a day later, I asked for it and they said it was already taken. But it was that circumstance that actually pushed me to be like, all right, well, I could lose my job at any time. So I'm going to go out on my own. I can do better. I took the leap and went out on my own. And then the last 8 years of owning my business has probably been the funnest, but most challenging at the same time. It's been a whirlwind of learning, trying to implement stuff from people from different phases of their business and their life. and me evolving as well, like trying to find my passions. I ended up making a big leap of faith and saying, hey, I'm going to work with professional athletes because I was following my vision of still following a similar goal that I wanted when it was becoming a player, just like my dad did, because I felt like I understood what they were going through. And I got to a point where this was just 2, 3 years ago where, my agency and what I've been building hit the valley of death period. I had the valley of death period. I was stuck at a certain spot. I had to do some mental changes, start bringing in some more A players, try to bring in A players. With valley of death period, it's very hard to bring in A players, but trying to bring in good people, possibly more leadership to take some of the responsibilities that I just don't have time for. But during that time frame, I was completely burnt out. When I first started my agency, my mindset was a fear driven growth, right? It was, hey, I have to prove to other people that I can grow. The money, the bank account was the only thing that I could show as a KPI to like show that worth. And funny enough, I achieved that. I achieved a point of 40 to 50% profit margins because I was in the valley of death and wasn't hiring better people yet. But I got to a point where I was just like, okay, my children were just born. My mindset was shifting. I was like, oh, my family loves me. My family sees me. Like, what now? Like, I don't have to, it's more about providing for them than it was showing to all these people in the world that I can do it. I could already do it. I proved it to myself that I could do it. Right. So went on this journey about a couple years ago, which I would call my third kind of like rebrand or restage or whatever you'd like to call it within my agency and my business, where I was like, all right, like things have to change. I have to do something different. What in my life right now do I feel the least capable of doing or achieving? And it was funny enough, moving away from a management type role and trying to become a better leader. And so I took up speaking because it was a fear of mine. I was always an introvert. So I took up speaking, and I just recently, about 2 months ago, finished my TEDx talk, and which was a great accomplishment for myself personally. But that's where I'm heading now. I'm heading into much more of a consulting slash implementation type phase for my agency, because the branding side of the business, I told you I did visual communications. I love that. That didn't really evolve as fast as my marketing side did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that I was having this burnout because I was no longer following the values that I used to love. I was just bringing these people on, saying I could help them. And I could help them. The problem was a lot of them didn't have their vision in place. They didn't have they didn't have their values in place. And I was taking on people that didn't match similar values to me. And it was burning me out. And so I've been slowly implementing a situation within the agency where it's like, how can we pivot to being an evolved agency that's much more about helping leaders prepare and utilize the branding process to help them brand themselves and understand how to lead by example through going through the processes of what we help to deliver. And so it's a slow change, but it's happening one day at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my life. That's a whole life in a nutshell you just got there.
Yeah, no, it's good. Very good. And I think you've got a couple brands. Creative, I think is one
Mhm.
brand, and GymMark's the other brand. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. What do they do?
So Creative is my original brand. So
Right.
Creative is the brand that we're evolving to. It's always been somewhat, my agency has always been very customized. I've always been a big believer in every business is different. You have to customize strategy different with every business. And so Creative is evolving that way. We still work on athletic and sports in the sports and athletic space. That's still our main target. But for me, and I don't know about you or whoever's listening to this as a leadership type role, but I don't think riches are in the niches sometimes. I think
Mm.
it really depends on the service. It depends on what stage of business you're at. And for me, my passions were more so like, hey, like our branding processes don't change no matter what type of business they are. So let's kind of stick with the larger demo of this space here. But then our marketing services, I realized that, hey, like these do need to be a little bit more systematized.
Mm.
These do need to be a little bit more honed in, because that's where we were having a lot of our mistakes when it came to certain demos. So GymMark is that culmination. It's, hey, we're going to take our team of doers and our team of me as a consultant and any other consultant that I bring on as the people that are going to help gyms of certain sizes grow based around what I've seen in the marketplace for those gyms. Still a lot of the similar services. The only difference is that now we have a systematized, productized service around them based off of what I've seen with other gyms that we have worked with. And most of that stuff comes around the brand and web development. Like we're able to now systematize that a little bit better because it's very niche down in that industry, right? And it also brings in some consulting. I'm a very big component on, hey, like you literally have you can grow a multi-million dollar gym in just a 3-mile radius. You don't need to spray the wall and call a million people. Like, let's build a community for you and let's leverage your digital and your print and or your customer service and leverage that to bring in new clientele. And so a hybrid, what I like to call helping them build their sustainable lead flow through positioning, experience, and reputation management.
Fascinating background, fascinating journey that you've had so far and where it's going for you. It's going to be exciting to see where it goes in the future for you too. Will be exciting to see where that happens. Question I've got for you is, we're talking about leadership and change here. Leadership, how did you get
Mhm.
into leadership?
I think I brought it up in my story, right? I think I just got to a point in my life where something was missing. I think there comes a time in any entrepreneur's life where I'm not going to say it's no longer about the money, but it's about team, right? You want to help people grow. I have kids now. I want to help them grow. And for me to become a good leader, I knew that I had to do things and lead by example that were going to help propel the business forward that I may not have done before. And so that's where the other forms of communication came in. That's where, okay, I need to get better at my writing. I need to get better at my verbal communication. I need to get better at becoming more of a leader to my team. And the way I saw doing that was by speaking, going out and doing something that I felt very uncomfortable at the time doing.
Do you think, you mentioned earlier on as part of your story that about branding and helping leaders with their branding too, whether it be an individual, whether it be an organization, whatever, but for them to be the leader in their industry. I don't think a lot of people even look at LinkedIn as an example of something, a tool that they can use to help them with their branding and other things too. How important is it for a leader to have their own brand? I know that for some people, they work for a large corporate or small to medium sized business, or they're an entrepreneur under their own business. But to have their own brand within those brands, how important is that?
Well, I think the real hard answer there is people assume that branding is like, oh, and let's just use the gym environment as a good example. Franchise is a great example of this. I was sitting down at a conference last week and speaking on this subject, and one of the old owners of SoulCycle brought up that one of their biggest challenges when they had these individual micro gyms was they would hire all these sales reps and or trainers, and then those trainers themselves would be any time that they left, the customers would most likely leave too,
Mm.
right? And at the end of the day, if leadership came in and branded themselves as basic, I'm not going to say the same person, but if the leader came in as just they were overall a nice guy, they wanted to help, and they matched those values to the rest of the people they brought on, it would be very easy for those customers to stay because those customers would value very similar things in relationships as those individuals. And so I do think that growing yourself as a personal brand, at the end of the day, it's really getting to know who you are and building your values and understanding that, hey, like I may be a big part of this corporate brand, and some of my values have to resonate with that larger corporation to make sure I align with what they're achieving, but with the customers as well. The customers need to be able to come in and feel, oh, hey, like I could go out to coffee with you tomorrow and we could have an hour and a half great talk. I want to work out here because I feel like I know you personally, or I do know you personally. And that in itself is going to build more retention in today's environment than, hey, let's just call a million people and try to get them into the gym. It's customer service, it's leadership. Like it basically is a sync of all those and being able to communicate those same values. And so I would say it's very important. It's very important for the owners slash leaders to be able to lead by example and show every single one of their employees and customers that, hey, like, this is who I am as a person. I'm not just here trying to make a quick buck. I'm here to help. Like, that's my goal, no matter what the vision is.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. Very good. Now, you and I have been shaped over our lives by other leaders and that. But my question for you would be, who's your favorite leader and why?
Yeah, I think that one's a hard question for me to answer because I feel like there's so many great people out there that I could give a generic example here and say like Martin Luther King or a president or but I really tend to resonate towards the leaders that we don't really know about. The leaders which you can't really give a name because most of them don't care as much about brand recognition than they do helping. And so I would say it may be a cop out answer, so to say, but I would say I would anyone that's out there trying to make a difference in this world and understanding that leadership, it's a hard position to have. It's also very pleasant once you get to a point where you're out there trying to make a difference in this world and helping not just people, but employees and customers. So I would say all the small fish. I'd say all the small leaders that are really scraping to make a difference in this world without any recognition.
Yeah. And I think that's actually not a cop out answer. I think it's a very good answer because of the sense of there is a lot of people, I call them the hidden leaders, right? So they're there and they're doing things day in, day out. Even if you think about, so in New Zealand here, we've got a guy who's become for Red Bull, their latest Formula One car racing driver, right? New Zealand as a country is small, but we're all celebrating his success on being selected. But then on the other side, it's all those people behind him that have gone there to help him become successful or to get that as well. His name's Liam Lawson, and that's where there's those hidden leaders. There's those people behind them that are helping people succeed. So, yeah, I think it's a great answer in what you're sharing. So we can learn a lot from those people as well. And a lot of them are doing it volunteers or they're doing all sorts of different roles, which is important.
What did you call it again?
What do you mean? The
What
hidden,
did you call it?
I call it
The
the
hidden leader.
hidden leaders. Yeah.
That's nice. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
Mm. The show here is called Leadership is Changing. When you look at that title or that statement, what does it mean for Zach?
What does it mean for me? Well, it means multiple things. I think that it's come so easy in today's economy slash world environment for people just to become delegators. We have online, we have, just in the digital space itself, I feel like social media has become very transactional and it's all be like, just do it, do it, do it. We have to put more out. We have to put more out. We have to do this. We have to do this. And I think it's changing because I do think people are starting to understand and grasp the importance of building a culture and building people that they resonate with that they can help not just externally but internally. How can we provide a company that's actually going to make a difference in this world than just focus on top line revenue? And I feel like a lot of people are starting to see, and that's why I'm a very big component of branding and leadership are very similar. They're basically, I would say, almost the same thing because it's one of those situations where people can start making a difference, much more of a difference in this world with, I'm not going to say very little impact, but like with smaller increments of impact than I would say 20, 30 years ago. And just understanding that this world isn't a transactional place. This world is a connection and relationship base. We're going backwards a little bit, right? With today's technology, like, I'd rather have human to human contact and build connections and make a difference, contribute to this world. And I think that that's where leadership is going. I think that that's where people are starting to see that this is, if we're all in this together, and the way to do that is through leadership.
Mm. Yep. When you said about going backwards a bit, it's quite interesting because here in New Zealand, when I was growing up as a kid, we used to go to the local store or the local supermarket, and to get our fruit and our other things, we'd actually have paper bags, and then they give it to us in paper bags. And then all this plastic stuff have happened and everything. But now they've got rid of all the plastic stuff and they've gone back to paper again, paper bags. And it's like,
Interesting.
wow, we've gone back again. It's really quite interesting to see how it's all actually working. So it resonates what you said to me about sometimes we're going backwards a little bit. And I like the other thing you say too is about the human connection, because even with artificial intelligence and other stuff, we really do need to have that human connection as well.
We do. What I see, because me in the digital space and working online, the two hardest things I've had to deal with, which I continue to try to focus on to this day, is how do you build culture with an online team, for one, and two, getting people to understand that, hey, the digital environment, social media wasn't made for transactions. It's not made for you just to email a million people and see if someone's going to come in and buy your service. It's about community. Isn't that the why social media came out to begin with? And so I think we're going backwards in that case and being like, oh, how can we implement things from the past and connection and bring them frontful towards this new environment of AI and where the internet's going?
That's really interesting how you say that. So the question you said was, how do you build a culture with an online team? How do you build the culture?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's funny how the brain works, right? Like when I first got into the field of visual communication, we had a whole room. And one of the reasons I loved it at ASU was because we had groups and teams. It was all a team environment. And then I remember being like, my biggest thing is I want to be able to work from home. That's why I want to become a graphic designer. That's what I thought at the time.
Yeah.
I will say now, it has its perks working from home, but I'm at the point where I'm like, man, I'll go out and spend $1 million on a place right now just because I want to have that culture and that community. And so as of right now, the only way that I can see building a culture internally is by making sure that we're having continued communication with each other, making sure the teams and continued conversations, not just sitting behind their desk and doing the work, but working with each other. I have to promote my team constantly to be like, why don't, even if I can answer that question, I'd be like, why don't you ask this person? Because this person, this is how they know it. But work with them on it, have them help you. And or just making sure our meetings are much more team focused. I'm a big component, especially working in the athletic and sports space, that when we bring on our employees, for instance, they all have a sense of personal time. They do something in their personal lives that help with their personal development. If it be one of our employees does horseback riding, one of them loves writing for movies. I, for instance, I love, like you said, going to the gym and having that to be my visionary time. Like, what is something that you do from a personal level and then have that relate to someone? And so every single person on my team, we make sure, how is your day going? How is your week? Did you do anything fun this weekend? Did you do anything fun last weekend? And we make sure that everyone thinks, oh, that's just water cooler talk, but it's really that water cooler talk that provides relationship building.
Yeah.
So I usually allow it. I allow and that's, as of right now, that's the best way I can see building that culture. I also try to have a lot of my team be in very similar locations, even if it's virtual. Like say, hey, be here in case they have to meet up or they want to go out and have their own little sesh outside of their home. And so I do my best to try to keep people at least somewhat close to each other when we hire them.
Yeah, very good. Because the New Zealand government just announced recently here that all public servants must go back into the office now for work and transitioning from that working from home. So on Fridays, I tend to do what we call an Ask Dennis episode, whereby it's just freestyle, it's just me, and it's 10,
Hmm.
15 minutes long. And the question I had was, working from the office versus working from home, where does productivity actually truly flourish, right? And it was actually so I looked at some surveys globally and things like that. So it's an interesting topic that a lot of people talk about in having it. But I think you're right in saying building communities, the communication, people feeling like they're having those water cooler discussions, even though they might be virtual. But that's where it starts to build relationships, where at the end of the day, all of this, your business, my business, what we do, even the podcast, it all comes down to relationships. And
Does it
yep,
does.
yep, we've got to build them as well. Now, you mentioned as well about a little bit early on about technology and that, but technology, data, social, business, it all seems to be getting faster and faster. So, what makes a leader successful in today's fast paced, ever changing world, in addition to what you've already shared so far?
Well, I can tell you I'm in the digital space. Content writing is one of our jobs. And so it's probably one of the biggest hits that has been hit by the situation of AI. What I've seen AI do from my perspective is that it's helped separate out the people that want strategy and creative compared to the people that just want a quick fix. And nothing wrong with those people that want a quick fix. They're just not there yet in their business mentality to understand the point of strategy. But that's one of them, and how important creativity and creating a vision and creating a strategy really is. And I see that from the customer side. Internally, we have tried to embrace it in a different way. We don't necessarily use AI for like our content writing. Like I'm a connection. I want all of my writers. It has to be human focused writing.
Yep.
That's where the best quality comes out. But we will use it for smaller type SOPs and sales and procedures type stuff, right? Like I'll use it to be like, hey, this is our process. Can you do a quick write up of this process for us so that I'm not gonna say waste my time, but I can utilize my time for more important things. And so I use it for that kind of stuff. And I use certain syncs with like Zapier or certain situations to make sure that I can have certain connections between platforms work correctly. And that's what I use it for the most, to get rid of those small tasks that really no one wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point because I think you're right. What you're saying there is that there are things as well. But I like what you say as well around the human focused content, right? Because you want it to be relatable and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I was been great at what it's done so far, but it's got a lot more to go yet, I think, and where it's going. Yeah. Hey, you and I have been talking about Zach here that from the lens of a leader's perspective. But if we change lens now and think about from an employee's perspective, do you think
Mhm.
employees' expectations of leaders have changed?
I think that's a hard one to answer because, as I think you're aware, there is such thing as a good leader compared to what I was saying earlier, like a delegator, like someone who assumes they're a leader when they're just a micromanager, right? And so I think their expectations, but here's a good example. I was talking to a personal trainer a couple of weeks ago. He actually worked for 2 different gyms, and he was talking about how I was asking him, I'm like, "What do you love about the leadership here?" And he was telling me about, "Oh, I love it. I love coming in every day." Well, what makes you love it? The leaders would actually come help them, ask them questions, be able to provide solutions. Like my other one, I just clock my 5 and I leave. And he's like, they come up to me, they tell me everything I'm doing wrong, they delegate, they do it all for me. And I think that that's what the expectations are. I think everyone thrives to learn.
Sure.
And I think everyone wants to grow in any position they're at. No one's going to come into a position from an employee standpoint and be perfect at the new job. And being able to have leadership to be able to guide them and help them and just know that they're wanted on the team, I think that's where expectations are going to continue to grow, if it be a small business or a large corporation. I think large corporations have a much harder time with that because they have so many employees and that communication barrier becomes a lot harder, but there are good ones out there. And I would say that's the expectations most employees just want. They just want a leader that supports them in their growing, field.
Great. Awesome. Great sharing there. Zach, if you were to get your crystal ball out here, just to bring things to a close, where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think we've talked about it through this whole thing. I think that leadership is becoming I think it's going to become the new buzzword. I think that people want to be better people and they want to thrive. And I think if you're a personal brand and or a leader of a corporation and or both, knowing that we are here to help other people, and I think that's the culmination of what leadership really is at the end of the day, right? And I think people are starting to see that, and I think that people are starting to recognize that, hey, if I want to grow a fruitful slash abundance type business, like I need to understand that connection and this contribution stuff is real. And that's really what's going to help move the needle, is all of us working together. And so I see leadership pushing towards that.
Yeah.
People that are just much more willing to not be self-centered.
Very good. I like it. Zach, if people are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you can always check out our website. You can go to creative.com. I know you'll leave that in the show notes. We're also creating a program right now, which is going to be on the website, which is going to help people of any stature become a better leader and helping them through their personal branding experience. So we're doing that now. That will be on the website. But If you really want to get to know more about me, you can always find me on LinkedIn or I will provide this later before this goes live, but my TEDx is coming out in a couple of weeks. And so I'll give you that as well. So you should be able to find that in the show notes. I don't have the direct link to it, but I'll put that down there as well. And you can listen to my story on how branding helps develop you.
Excellent. Well, Zach, once again, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. It's been a real pleasure having you on as a guest.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Excellent. There you go, listeners. Well, here you are as a leader. My question to you is, what is your leadership brand? What does it look like today? What's it going to look like tomorrow? What is it? What is that brand that you have? But the question is here, can you build a culture with the team online? Can you build a community? If you can communicate well, that's a great thing. But what about if you can build relationships like the water cooler discussions? Everyone thrives to learn and everyone wants to know about how they can grow. So leadership, is that the new buzzword going forward? Well, we'll see what's going to happen. Hey, it's a pleasure being with you all. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.